Fuad al-Mibza says the vote will elect representatives for a constitutional committee tasked with writing a new constitution. Mibza also says he intends to stay on as interim president past March. Under Tunisia's constitution, his term as interim president should end on March the 15th. Now, at least 6 women have been killed by security forces who back Côte d'Ivoire's defiant leader, Laurent Gbagbo. Witnesses say the women were gunned down in Abidjan while marching in support of Alassane Ouattara. Ouattara is the internationally recognized winner of November's presidential election. Bernard Smith reports, and just a warning, some of the images may be disturbing.
Shot dead here as they prepared to protest against the Côte d'Ivoire's incumbent president, Laurent Gbagbo. The victims were at least 6 women, part of an all-female demonstration, say witnesses, that thought their sex would make them safe. It's another sign that this country risks tumbling back into civil war.
Our mothers went out to march peacefully. Then we saw Gbagbo's tanks. They came and opened fire on the old women, killing at least 6 on the spot.
And this mortuary in Abobo, a suburb of Abidjan, is full. The 50 bodies delivered in the last 5 days have been piled on the floor. More bloody proof of the escalating violence between troops loyal to Gbagbo and supporters of Alassane Ouattara. The UN endorsed Ouattara's victory in November's election, but he remains holed up in an Abidjan hotel. Foreign delegations shuttle back and forth, but there's little progress. No amount of prodding and cajoling from the international community has managed to shift Gbagbo from the presidency. He still controls the military, though it's not known how much cash he still has to pay them. But Gbagbo can count on his protege, Charles Blé Goude, to whip up the self-styled young patriots. In the west of the country, rebels have wrested control of a small town from pro-Gbagbo forces, another sign of deteriorating security. And according to the UN, electricity and water supplies to the north of Côte d'Ivoire have now been cut. Most of Ouattara's support comes from here. So far, at least 130,000 people have been forced to flee the violence in Côte d'Ivoire. Almost 400 people are known to have been killed. Diplomats think the real number is much higher. Elsewhere in the world, recently, governments have been brought down by figures far less dramatic than that. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
Well, members of the United Nations Security Council have been discussing the situation in Côte d'Ivoire. Kristen Salumi is live for us at the UN. Kristen, what's the UN saying about this recent escalation in the violence?
Well, the United Nations is very concerned about the escalation. They're saying that there is possibly, the situation is possibly once again devolving into a civil war. And they called on Gbagbo to once again step down. They've called for this in the past. They said that they are ready to impose targeted sanctions against him if the situation continues. And they called on UN forces in Côte d'Ivoire to use all means necessary to carry out their mandate to protect civilians. The ambassador to the United Nations from Côte d'Ivoire is actually asking the United Nations to do even more. He thinks that there needs to be more international intervention there, a stronger mandate for UN peacekeepers there, and he is worried, frankly, that the situation in Libya is overshadowing what's happening in his country. Here's what he had to say.
You recall, 2 months ago, I warned about the genocide. Today, I will reiterate it, the genocide in the making. They are killing people along ethnic lines. They are killing nationals from foreign countries, for neighboring countries. They are killing people who are opposed to Mr. Gbagbo. That's not acceptable today in the 21st century, where elsewhere the people are taking their responsibility and asking for more democracy, more freedom. That's not acceptable.
Kristen, Yusuf Abamba, they're using a word that shouldn't be used lightly. Genocide, definitely highlighting the scale of the situation there and the scale of concern there. Just remind us as to what the UN's mandate actually is and whether they can actually physically intervene or not.
Their mandate is very specifically to protect civilians and UN operations there. Right now, there are about 9,000 UN troops in the country. They have authorization for another 2,000, and they are waiting for those to arrive. They're in the process of soliciting them from donor countries. So these troops right now are patrolling with the police force there. They are trying to intervene where there's where civilians are being threatened. They say they're using tear gas when there's a situation, when there's a blockade where the UN can't patrol, or there's a situation that needs to be addressed. They're also responding on a humanitarian level, the United Nations. They're providing water in areas where the power has been cut, and without power, there's no clean drinking water. So they're trying to hand out water. And they're also calling for a humanitarian corridor to open up in Abobo, where the fighting is the most intense, so that there can be an opportunity for people to move in and out of this area without fear of being hurt, for supplies to go in and to come out, and for the wounded to be treated in this area where the heavy fighting is taking place.
Kristen, thanks a lot for that. Kristen Salumi live for us there from the UN in New York, talking about the humanitarian situation. Let's get someone from the UN. Jacques Franquin is the UNHCR representative in Côte d'Ivoire, and he joins us on the line from Abidjan. Thanks a lot for joining us, Mr. Franquin. As I understand, there are two refugee situations here. The one relates to those who are internally displaced, the IDPs. The other relates to those who have fled across the border to Liberia. Paint the picture for us and explain the distinction.
Yes, you're correct. I would say that the situation in the West is deteriorating since the beginning of December, and since we have seen an influx of refugees from Côte d'Ivoire going to Liberia, especially, where we are counting now more than 70,000 refugees, which is quite alarming, of course. And inside the country, the situation is worsening every day. From a humanitarian point of view, due to the fighting in Abidjan last week, we have seen that has been bringing to an influx of displaced people. All the population of Abobo, or a large part at least, has been moving out of the district of Abobo to the city center, and we are estimating the number at between 200 up to 300,000 people that are displaced now in Abidjan only, plus the situation in the West, where we can say that basically the war has started and bringing to a lot of people on move. We are estimating the number at more than 100,000 right now.
Now, these people are on the move because they feel targeted by different militias. Is there any group in particular that is being targeted, or is it happening on both sides? And is there a distinct lack of protection for these civilians?
Yes, definitely. You know, this is not. I don't think this is targeted against one ethnic group in particular. What